Yo, welcome, welcome. Nice to see you here. Tell the other homies if they're not already coming. I think No Shells and Uncle Sam should be here. Hopefully, Monarchist Man. I think Monarchist Man. I already DM'd him. He said he'd come. Maybe Julius. That'd be cool if we could get him. Um, okay, let's see who else is there. I think Drumstick is asleep, honestly. Is there anyone else? I think No Shells is gonna join, so not worried about him. Yeah. Yeah, I have Redeem Zoomer. Dude, Redeem Zoomer and I, we used to actually talk like a decent amount. Um, yeah. We've had like multiple conversations over several months. Yo, let's go. Welcome, Monarchist Man. Why is this so freaking behind, anyways? I don't know who you are, Alexander Ovechkin, but welcome to the stream. Okay, you guys can all hear me, right? If you can hear me, just write like yes in the stream. Oh, I think I know who Alexander Ovechkin is. Okay, never mind. I think I know who this is. All right, let's go. Welcome, Uncle Sam. Welcome, Sir Welch. Welcome, Nioski. I think I'll just send a link to No Shells. I told Logan already. Where is this guy? Here. Who else is likely to join? Okay. Okay. Who's No Shells? He's a guy. He's a guy. We'll see soon. Anyways, I will wait 2 minutes and then we're gonna get started. Slideshows already. I've reviewed it. I've gone over it just now. I'm pretty excited, guys. Like, I mean, pretty much everyone's watching this, at least live. Pretty much everyone watching this live already knows. But for those of you who are watching later, who are either watching the stream later, who will watch it in a video format, I'm really excited about this. Because this is one of, I wouldn't say it's one of the biggest. I mean, it is a pretty big project, but I would say it's pretty much the most fun project I've ever worked on. All right. Now let's get this officially started. So hello everyone, this is Mike History, and welcome to the first part of my History of Christianity stream. It should be pretty straightforward what this is. I am going to go over the entire history of Christianity. It will be in a slideshow format, but one thing, which is for those of you who are already subscribed to the channel, that is the Ollie Chords plotting a mass report. What, of me? Because if that's going on, that's actually kind of crazy. Also, if you don't mind me asking, Alexander Ovechkin, who are you? Like, are you someone I already know or not? I mean, you know at least a little bit because you know that Ollie chord. That, anyways. Anyway, sorry. Let me get back to what I was saying. Yeah, so this is my history of Christianity presentation that I've been working on. It's in a slideshow format, so it's pretty different from my usual stuff. Of course, there will be words, but there's not really a script. Oh, I know who's calling me. I know. Every time I'm doing my official announcement, something goes wrong. Anyways, honestly, whatever. I think I'll just do an official start, put it in video format, and then just get straight to the slideshow because, yeah. By the way, ... Also, what does this even mean? Number 1, number 2? Oh. Crispy Fritz is Alexander Ovechkin. Okay. I didn't realize that. I don't know. I guess I've never seen you in my streams. I just assumed I had. Anyways, yeah. We're not doing the intro anymore. Hopefully we have everyone. Looks like Julius is about to join. So, okay, it's 9:15. Yeah, I think we can start now. We have 4 people watching, so I assume it's these 3 plus Sir Welch, if I'm not wrong. And hopefully... No! Am I losing viewership already? Guys, I haven't even started! Anyways, hopefully they'll come back. But yeah, hopefully someone try to get Logan in the chat and Julius as well. And I think that's it. I don't think we're adding anyone else right now. So, yeah. Okay. We shall begin. So first of all, another thing too, right before I get started, I will like do this all slideshow presentation, whatever. If you can't see it, I'll check the chat right before just to make sure this all works. And yeah. Alrighty. Oh no. I'm starting the freaking middle, guys. I'm sorry. Anyways, there we go. Boom, boom. All right. So can all of you guys see this? Oh, I forgot. This is so dumb. I forgot how this happens. Where if you, I guess I'll just have to put this on the other slide because otherwise, I'm sorry about this. This is so badly organized. My bad. Royal Marines, don't know who you are, but welcome. Okay, so we are going to put this over here, and then now we can start the slideshow, and I can still swipe screen to see what's going on in the chat, hopefully. Nice. Okay, looks like you guys can see. Got a lot of hundreds in the chat. Oh, I can't add my own. Oh, I can. Okay. That's cool. Anyways, it looks like there's still only 3 people here. So for the other ones who've already joined, it'd be nice if you stay. But anyways, we're going to get started. All right. So once again, this is like my 3rd intro attempt. Welcome to my History of Christianity stream. This is different from my usual content. There's not a script, so you will hear more offhand comments. Might be a couple of ums and uhs. Actually, there will be some ums and uhs. But hopefully that does not bother you too much. This is something that I'm very excited about. I've been working on it for quite a while. It took about 2 months to do this. But I also made all the maps, pretty much, at least all the maps concerning the spread of Christianity itself. And that actually took longer. That probably took me like three months to do. But it's been really fun. And actually the whole reason that I'm even doing this presentation is because I had the maps and then I was like, wait a second, what's the point of the maps if people don't know the story behind the maps? You know, why are these places converting to Christianity. And so, yeah, this will be introduction, I guess, to the history of Christianity. I try to keep it a bit less serious than my average video. There'll be more jokes, be all that kind of stuff, but also it will remain educational. And so with that, let's get started. So we're going to start off with the apostolic age. So I already know that obviously the vast majority of my audience will either be Christian and or familiar with Christianity. So for most of you, this isn't the case, that you don't know about what's going on. But just for the couple of people who might be watching and might not know that much, it is important for me to just give a little bit of context here first. So, of course, Christianity, we all know, starts with Jesus, and Jesus had 12 main followers called the apostles, and so the time that they're alive is known as the apostolic age. Also, one thing that's very important to note here is that I will not be going over the life of Jesus, mainly because, one, Christianity is the religion of those who follow Jesus, so I didn't really feel the need to include Jesus himself. And also because, quite frankly, Jesus' story is very well known, and if you don't know it already, you could watch a show, watch a movie about it, or just read the New Testament. Any of those. Why is this still here, guys? Anyways, I don't know why this thing is still here. So, we'll go to the start of the church. And also, I'll check the chat one more time just to make sure we're all good. Of course, I go back and this is the first thing I see. Anyways, if we're all good, just write in the chat and then we'll continue from there. Also, I will be checking the chat every once in a while, so just so you know. He has a request, okay. Continue. Start with a prayer for Grandma Sherry. Okay, sure. All right, so those of you who don't know, one of my good buddies, his grandmother, unfortunately, recently passed away, so we're just going to have a prayer for her. Anyways, Lord Jesus, we thank you for Sherry. I'm sure she was a wonderful woman, and we pray that you'll be with her wherever she may be, and you'll also comfort Leo and his family. Amen. All right, let's go to the start of the church. All right, so Christianity's apostolic age began after 120 believers, including all the apostles, received the Holy Spirit and began preaching the gospel in an event known as Pentecost. And I believe Pentecost was roughly 50 days after Jesus ascended, although don't quote me on that. Now, within just a decade, the believers had begun to preach from Jerusalem all the way to Rome. And at Antioch, the believers were first given the name Christians. And an interesting thing about this is we don't know whether the word Christian was actually a compliment or a derogatory term, but regardless, that's what they are called now. The first ever church was set up in Jerusalem, and it was headed by James, the brother of Jesus. And this consisted only of Jewish believers. Now, what that meant is that Jewish laws were strictly adhered to. Now, again, I understand most of you know this context already, but for those of you who don't, Christianity comes out of Judaism, and in Judaism there are a lot of ceremonial laws about, for example, what kind of food you can eat. They're very focused on not working on Sabbath, which is the holy day dedicated for God, that kind of stuff. And so at this time, all Christians, because all Christians were Jews, all Christians were following these Jewish ceremonial laws. Anyways, this is a depiction of Pentecost, and basically you might be wondering, why are their heads on fire? For those of you who do not already know, essentially, the Holy Spirit is said to have come in tongues, is said to have come in these kind of little flames, almost, that appeared over people's heads, and that allowed them to speak in different languages. It's not really implied that this was like literal fire. It's more of sort of a way of explaining the change that happened. But yeah, that is essentially Pentecost here. Pretty cool image. Okay, now let's move on to Paul the Apostle, who arguably, I guess one could say, is the most important Christian ever. And we will see why. There's this pretty epic painting. We'll understand why this is soon. So actually, one of the main opponents to these new religion of Christianity was Saul of Tarsus, who used to whoop believers, and by whooping believers I mean he used to go out and kill a bunch of them, until he bumped into Jesus on his way to kill more Christians, and he lost his sight for a while. He then renamed himself from Saul to Paul and began to be the first apostle to the Gentiles. And the Gentiles, for those of you who don't know, are just non-Jewish people. Now, he introduced Christianity specifically to the Greek world, going to Ephesus, Philippi, Corinth, and Thessalonica. And he was the foremost Christian thinker and author of the Apostolic Age, and placed a great emphasis on salvation by faith, and strongly objected to the idea that you had to follow the Jewish law to be saved. And trust me, this becomes a very important issue. So now we get to the first ever controversy in the Christian church, and trust me, this is the first of many, many controversies. Now, before we get to that, let's check the chat real quick. Okay, good so far. Nice. All right, so the circumcision controversy. So this change in attitudes towards the Jewish law soon led to questions about whether these Gentiles were also under the Jewish law. And many converted Pharisees insisted that they had to be snipped to be saved. And for those of you who don't know what circumcision is, I'd say look that up in your own time. However, Paul believed that Jesus' death and resurrection ended the separation between Jews and Gentiles, who could now also be included in God's covenant, which had previously only been with the Jewish people. Now, this led Paul to visit the leaders of the Jerusalem church, which led to the Council of Jerusalem, the first ever church council around 50, which said and concluded that the Gentiles, and therefore Christians more generally, didn't have to follow Jewish law anymore. Now, unfortunately, the council did not totally solve the issue, since many of James's followers kept insisting that Jewish Christians had to follow the Old Testament laws. This caused Peter to actually break fellowship with Gentiles for a while, which caused him to be called out by Paul very publicly. After Herod Agrippa the king tried to kill him, James became the main leader of the church. However, in 62, James, the brother of Jesus, was killed on the order of the high priest, and this was the first sign of the upcoming wave of persecution. Now we get to the end of Jewish Christianity. Now, the first great persecution of Christians really began after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 was blamed on Christians by Emperor Nero, who in a very famous story is said to have been playing music while watching the city burn. Whether that happened or not, we don't know, but also he was kind of a cruel, psychopathic guy, so it wouldn't even be that surprising. And he totally did take advantage of the fire to create a massive palace, which I've been to, by the way, for himself in the burnt out areas. Now, some notable martyrs from this time are, well, Peter and Paul. Now, the first Jewish-Roman war broke out in 66, which resulted in the siege of Jerusalem in 70 and the destruction of the Jewish temple. This, alongside the deaths of Peter and Paul, marked the end of the period of Jewish Christianity. And again, I really want to emphasize here how important it was that the temple was destroyed, because for the Jews, the temple was the place where, well, it was this literal center of their religion. It was where they performed sacrifices. They had already had their temple destroyed once, rebuilt it, and then it was destroyed for good at this point. Now, as Jews began scattering from Jerusalem across the empire, Antioch switched from Jerusalem to become the main center of Christianity, and Christianity at this time became mainly a Gentile religion. So this is the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And what's interesting actually is that, at least as far as I know, it wasn't even intentional. Rather, what happened is that it seems like a Roman accidentally set fire to the building, and then the entire thing got destroyed. So the only thing that's left of the temple now is the Wailing Wall, which is actually part of the original foundation of the temple. And now we get to the end of the Apostolic Age. During the end of the reign of Emperor Domitian, who reigned from 89 to 96, a smaller persecution of Christians occurred, resulting in the exile of John the Apostle to Patmos in Greece, where he took some acid and wrote the Book of Revelation. Those of you who've read the Book of Revelation will get what I'm saying. No, he did not actually take acid, for those of you who are worried about that. As the century ended, it had become increasingly apparent even to the Romans that Christianity was indeed a separate religion from Judaism, and in 98, Emperor Nerva declared that Christians no longer had to pay the yearly tax for Jews, in effect recognizing officially that Christianity was indeed a different religion. Now, by the end of the first century, the New Testament had been written, the apostles were dead, and Christianity was now commonly recognized as a distinct religion. It was time to move forward. So let's look at the growth of Christianity in the first century. By 100, there were around 7,000 Christians, or 0.01% of the Roman population. During the first and second century, though, Christians were growing by 40% a decade. Christianity grew at this quick pace since there were no fees and baptism was free. It was also attractive to women since they were allowed greater freedom than in Roman paganism, and therefore women made up a significant portion of the church. And here is a map of the Christian majority areas. So for those of you who are wondering a little bit about the maps that I will be using, essentially this base map comes from the game EU4. I chose it because it's a pretty nice base map to use, has relatively good sized provinces, and is just something convenient. But we can see that, of course, right, Christianity was not a majority religion in a lot of the world, but it was already taking hold. By this time, Alexandria, Antioch, some of northern Israel, and even this small island here, Socotra, were all already majority Christian, well, by the year 100. So we can see that Christianity is starting off fairly well. Now, let's go to the Apostolic Fathers. Clement of Rome was the first Apostolic Father, serving as a Bishop of Rome from 92 to 100, and his first epistle is the oldest Christian epistle outside of the New Testament. Another major Apostolic Father was Polycarp, who was the Bishop of Smyrna, who tried but failed to persuade Pope Anicetus to have Western Christians celebrate Easter on the same day as in the East, and trust me, this Easter thing will become more important. Now, the word Christianity itself was first coined by Ignatius of Antioch, the Bishop of Antioch from 68 to 107. And on his way to martyrdom, he wrote a series of letters where he identified the church hierarchy being of bishops, presbyters, and deacons. So again, for those of you who don't know, essentially deacons are kind of the guys who assist in the church. The presbyters are either known as the pastors or the priests today, so they are the main ones running the church, and then the bishops were there to be overseers. Ignatius also first coined the word Catholic, and can be considered in some way the first Catholic, as he was also the first to refer to the Bishop of Rome as the main leader of church and the vicar of Christ. For those of you who don't know, by the way, Catholic means universal. So this is Clement of Rome, and this is Ignatius of Antioch. We get the influence of philosophy. So as Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, it began being corrupted by local beliefs. Christians in Asia Minor emphasized union with Jesus as the way to reach eternal life. Christians in Rome were influenced by Stoicism and emphasized ethics and morality, which led to an emphasis on penitence. Christians in Alexandria, meanwhile, were influenced by Platonism and were focused on ethics and allegorical emphasis on the Old Testament. Now we're going to check in the chat real quick. Let's see. All right. Are you circumcised? Don't know if I want to answer that publicly, but it's cool. I'll just get some water. I'll be back in a second here. All right, folks, I'm back. I am rejecting your petition, sir. Okay. Good God, bad God. Around the end of the first century, the first heresy emerged in Christianity known as Gnosticism. One of the most successful early Gnostics was the priest Valentinus, who served in the second half of the 2nd century. He believed that the material world was a prison created by the demiurge, an evil spirit who created the world. And this evil demiurge was the Old Testament God, which is an interesting take, to say the least. Now, secret knowledge would allow people to liberate their souls and allow them to return to the true God. For them, Jesus was the liberator of humanity against his father, apparently just being a typical rebellious teenager. Now, I know some of you have opinions on Gnosticism. I'd be interested in seeing what you all think. Pro and anti-Gnosticism at the same time. Okay, so what is that you like and don't like about it? All right, let's continue. The failed Jesus. Now, when the Jews rebelled again in 132, the Christians refused to join them since their leader Simon Bar Kokhba claimed to be a Messiah. And as any good Messiah does, he actually just lost. Now, once his rebellion was crushed in 135, this marked the final split between Jews and Christians, including Jewish Christians. This was because Emperor Hadrian banned Jews from Jerusalem, and so all the bishops of Jerusalem after that were Gentiles. This guy, Marcion. Who is this guy? In 140, Marcion of Sinope, Sinope, I don't know, was the first person to propose a Christian canon. What that means is the first person to basically propose the idea of a Christian Bible. And after him, Christian texts began being divided into heretical and canonical categories. 4 years later, he was kicked out of the Church of Rome, and he developed a theology claiming that there was a difference between the evil Old Testament God and the good New Testament God. A very original idea, not one that we just looked at. He believed that Jesus' main mission was to overthrow the evil Old Testament God. Never mind that Jesus never said any of that. And he also wrote his own Gospel of Marcion, because I guess he needed to up those book skills. It looks like there were hustlers back in the day as well. Now we get to the Great Church. What is the Great Church? Well, good question. The Great Church was a period starting in 180 between the broader apostolic age and the legalization of Christianity, and saw many major changes that would define the future of the religion. Some of the great changes already seen before the start of the Great Church started around 150, such as the development of Mariology, and that includes the perpetual virginity of Mary, intercession of the saints, and relics. So this is what Christianity looked like by 180. Again, not crazy growth, but we can see that it is now spreading, ironically enough, actually in former ISIS territory, and then also spreading a little bit in Anatolia. And by this time also the Jerusalem area was majority Christian as well. Now we get to Irenaeus. So Irenaeus, he was the bishop of Lugdunum up until his death in 202, and his writings were very influential in the development of the theology of the Great Church. He was the first to refer to Mary as the co-redemptrix, the first to explicitly refer to the Bishop of Rome as the leader of the entire church, and the first to refer to sacred tradition as a definitive source of authority in the church. He also was the first to use the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit formula and wrote a famous piece of theology called Against Heresies around 180. It was during his time that several practices emerged, such as infant baptism, the idea of apostolic succession, and the establishment of a monarchical bishop. And what that means is that essentially the bishop had total control over the Christians in one city. So Clement of Alexandria headed the school of Alexandria, and he created Christian Platonism by combining Greek philosophy with Christian theology, because apparently the book of Plato didn't make the cut for the Bible. The school of Alexandria was revived by his pupil Origen, with an E, not with an I, who produced a corrected Old Testament in Greek and wrote commentaries on every book of the Bible, which is pretty impressive. I mean, just reading the whole thing took me a year. And that's when I tried my hardest. I mean, it took me like 2.5 years other times. He used Greek philosophy to interpret the Bible allegorically. He believed that all creatures, including demons, would be reunited with God. He did not see God as Yahweh, but as the first principle, even though he had thoroughly studied the entire Bible, and so he should have come to a different conclusion. So, an unofficial movement to ostracize Christians from public spaces in Lugdunum, which is modern-day Lyon, France, led to persecution in 177. Christians were imprisoned, tortured, and fed to beasts. Persecution resumed during the reign of Septimius Severus from 193 to 211, although it remains unclear how much he was personally involved in it. An emperor who was more involved in persecutions was Maximinus Thrax, which I always thought was a very interesting, if not cool, name. Now, Christians who refused to honor the fake Roman pagan gods were punished, with Roman citizens beheaded or exiled, while non-citizens and slaves were put to death by wild beasts to entertain people. Because who doesn't want to watch beheadings for an afternoon out with your buddies? So this over here is Blandina. She was a servant girl who was killed during the persecution in Lugdunum in 177, and there would be a lot of martyrs like her. Now we get to the question of whether Jesus is human or divine. It is definitely a question that many have asked in the past and continue to ask in the present, but it was not always 100% settled in the early church. There were several beliefs, in fact, that were later deemed heretical. The Ebionites, an early group of Jewish Christians, believed in adoptionism, which stated that Jesus was born as a human and then was found in an orphanage and adopted by God. Okay, not the orphanage part, but they do believe he was adopted by God when he was baptized. Now, this was declared a heresy by Pope Victor I, who served as the Bishop of Rome from 189 to 199. Around this time, another heresy known as Docetism emerged, which stated that Jesus' body and crucifixion were illusions, and due to this, he couldn't have really died. The Docetists would have a lot in common with the Muslims, it looks like. Now we get to the Carthage Christ Bros. Who's this guy? Tertullian. He was an author from Carthage who was the first great writer in Latin Christianity, and is sometimes referred to as the father of the Latin Church. He was the person who introduced many important terms. Ever heard of Trinity? That's him. Old Testament and New Testament? That's him. He was also the first Latin author to write of Christianity as the true religion and considered paganism as superstition. Spot on. He fiercely denounced many heresies, but then later joined the Montanists, who were considered heretical by most Christians, so I guess he failed in his mission. Sorry. Another important Carthaginian Latin father was Cyprian, who served as the city's bishop from 249 to 258. All right, time to check the chat now. Let's see how things are going. Saint Feminazi in 2025 is crazy work, bud. Beheading, you mean involuntary post-birth abortions? Their bodies, their choice. Based? Trinity equals cringe, not based. Well, you know, I'm not going to explain the Trinity on the stream. It's not what it's for. Hello. I'm still here, so am I. I'm also still here. Okay, y'all can still hear me fine, right? I'm like a bit further away from the mic just because I'm a bit tired, but it seems like everything's fine, right? Okay, let's move on. Now we get to the first great persecution. So as I explained before, right, of course there have been persecutions, but This is the first big one. The first empire-wide and official persecution of Christians was known as the Decian persecution, named after Emperor Decius, who reigned from 249 to 251, so only actually 2 years. It began with an edict he issued in 250, which required all people except Jews to perform a sacrifice to Roman gods and obtain a signed witness certificate. Due to this pressure, over 3,000 Christians were martyred, but many apostatized out of fear. Most of these repented and were let back into the church, but some churches, especially in newly Christianized Africa, and by the way, when we say Africa here, we mean Tunisia, because that was the name of the Roman province there, refused to let them back in. Now we get to Valerian's persecution. That's Valerian. Not cool. Glad we broke his nose. Now, not long after Decius' death in 253, Emperor Valerian took the throne. 4 years later, he ordered all Christian clergy to sacrifice to the Roman gods and banned Christians from meeting in ceremonies. He later ordered all bishops to be executed, and all Christian noblemen would lose their titles and property. If they refused to sacrifice, they would also be martyred. One prominent martyr was none other than Bishop Cyprian of Carthage. But Valerian's luck wouldn't last forever, because God got the last laugh and he would be captured by the Persians in 260. Sucks to suck. Even worse for his luck, his son Gallienus ended the persecution. This started what's known as the Little Peace of the Church, because this was a time during which Christianity became more integrated into the Roman culture. This really became apparent when Christians asked Emperor Aurelian, who again is not a Christian, to depose the adoptionist bishop of Antioch, Paul of Samosata, in 272, which is a bit funny because if you know anything about Aurelian, I think he had bigger fish to fry, as in reuniting the empire and avoiding assassination. Now, by 280, the area around Rome itself had actually become majority Christian, and Christianity started growing roots in the western part of the Roman Empire. So this is what the church looked like during the Little Peace of the Church. So we can see by now, right, the entire eastern Mediterranean coast had become Christian. We see that the province of Africa, which again is this region, had become Christian. Alexandria, of course, even spreading to different parts of Arabia. And then even a little bit in Switzerland, of all places. So you can see very much, obviously, it's still an Eastern religion, again, mostly concentrated in the Middle East and Greece. But Christianity is starting to spread west. So, yeah. Well, we get to the first ever Christian state. By 300, Christians made up a tenth of the Roman population. So not bad. But Rome would not actually be the first ever Christian state. That honor instead would go to Armenia. King Tiridates III had ordered the persecution of Christians, but one Christian named Gregory refused to sacrifice to their false pagan gods. He was persecuted, but at some later point healed the king and was released. After this, Tiridates and his court converted to Christianity in 301, and then Gregory went around the country destroying pagan temples like a total epic savage. He was then consecrated as Bishop of Armenia and erected several churches. And so this is our Gigachet over here. Gregory the Illuminator, called that because he illuminated the dark pagan lands of Armenia with the truth of the gospel. Pretty cool guy, if you ask me. And so this is what Christianity now looked like in 301. So we can see just in that short time, in the last 30-ish years, it has spread a lot. So we see Armenia here now has become Christian. Pretty much all of the Levant, Syria, large parts of Mesopotamia, large parts of Arabia, more of Africa. Rome itself at this point had become majority Christian. Different parts of Gaul, northern Italy as well. So Christianity spread a good amount. So let's check in on the chat now. Armenia mentioned, yes. Based for calling pagan gods false, yes. Of course you would say that. Oh, I hope Discord notifications haven't been going on in the background because I just realized it's been on the entire time. And I have my mic on, so that's why I can't actually hear anything. But I'll just turn this off. Okay. Anyways, sorry. Were there Discord notifications going on in the background? Because I don't know. Just can just write like no notifications or no Discord. Okay. All right. Moving on. The rise of Diocletian. Scary looking guy. Now, despite this good news in Armenia, the Christians in the Roman Empire were about to face the greatest challenge ever. Diocletian became emperor in 285 and purged the army of Christians, surrounding himself with anti-Christians. He wanted to restore Rome to its former glory and saw Christianity as an obstacle to that goal. Diocletian decided to reorganize the Roman Empire and came up with the Tetrarchy system, which would have the empire split in two, with one emperor in the east and another in the west, known as Augustus, and then their deputy emperors would become known as Caesar. So yeah, Julius Caesar would be thrilled about hearing that. Now we get to the Great Persecution. In 302, Diocletian's Caesar Galerius urged him to begin a general persecution of Christians. This persecution officially began on the 23rd of February 303, and all Christians were required to sacrifice to the Roman gods. Where have we seen this story before? But the persecution was not as fierce across the empire, but was more vigorously pursued in the east by Diocletian and Galerius, where there also were more Christians, and less so in the west by Maximian and his Augustus, Constantius Chlorus. Now, Constantius was actually the lazy guy in the whole persecution group project, and barely even tried to persecute. His son Constantine ended the persecution in Britain and Gaul when he took over in 306. Also may have helped that his mother was a Christian. So here is a famous image. It obviously was made centuries later, but still famous image of kind of what Christian persecution could have looked like. We see people here being crucified, used as living torches, because yes, that is something that did actually happen. The crowd is there watching this for entertainment reasons. And then you have the Christians here praying before they're about to be eaten by animals. So yeah, pretty tough time to be Christian. Not a fun time to be alive. Now, in 305, Anthony the Great decided to take a break from being persecuted and chose to chill out in the Egyptian desert, which I think sounds a lot more fun than being mauled alive by lions in the Colosseum. A lot of people thought, hey, this guy's got a good idea, and Anthony decided to become a hermit with them, therefore becoming the first monk, because essentially the difference between a monk and a hermit is hermits are by themselves and monks are not. I think you could tell this is Anthony, in case you didn't know. These monks were chose to be poor and gave up all their possessions, even their Xboxes. There were two types of monasticism. There was eremitical and cenobitic. Now, I know these sound like just nerdy terms, like eremitical and cenobitic. So we're going to explain a little bit. So eremitical monasticism was characterized by villages of hermits who mostly spent time alone. In other words, the introvert monks. And then cenobitic monasticism was characterized by community life, and it was basically the path for extroverts or people with friends. That doesn't include me, by the way. Anyways, we will not go on about that. We get to the end of the Diocletianic persecution. Western Augustus, Maximian's successor Severus II, was overthrown by Maxentius in 306, who promised religious toleration. Despite having instigated the persecution, in 311 Galerius weirdly passed the Edict of Serdica, which ended the persecution in the east. But his successor Maximinus was like, no, bro, and he resumed the persecution. In 312, Constantine and then Maxentius went to war to determine who would rule the Western Roman Empire. Constantine gathered 40,000 soldiers and reached the edge of Rome on the 27th of October. Now we get to the battle that changed the faith, and I would actually argue the most important battle in human history. Here's a preview. Now that evening Constantine had a vision in which he saw a cross of light above the sun, with the words, "By this sign you shall conquer." He then had his soldiers paint a chi rho, or the first two letters of Christ in Greek, on their shields. The next day his soldiers fought Maxentius on the Milvian Bridge, during which Maxentius drowned, allowing Constantine to enter Rome. Maxentius's body was found, and his head was chopped off and paraded around town. By the way, this was like normal back then, allowing Constantine to become the uncontested Western Roman Emperor. In 313, Constantine and co-emperor Licinius passed the Edict of Milan, which ended the Diocletianic persecution and legalized Christianity. Now we get to Constantine's early reign. Now 312 is probably the most important year in Christian history, since it marked Christianity's transition from an underground movement to a powerful and flourishing religion. Constantine soon began getting involved in church affairs. In 316 he acted as a judge in a dispute concerning Donatism. Donatists believed that only holy Christians who had not apostatized could administer sacraments. Constantine tried to solve the dispute and ruled against the Donatists, but they just said nah, and the split continued. Alright, let's check in on the chat. How's everyone doing? Are you guys enjoying it so far? Learning anything new? Even their Xboxes. This is the past two. I do know the reference. Oh, let's go 6 people. Let's go Giga Cheds. I think it's like one of my biggest streams recently. 6 people. Nice. That sounds so pathetic when I have like almost 3,000 subs, but then again, it's like, you know, how many of those actually regularly watch? Oh, the meme. Yeah. I remember the meme. It's like, what is it? Father Jim Bob buries the last Bible before Constantine. Let's go, 7 people. Woo! Alright, guys. Looks like you're... No, anyways, we're close. Looks like you guys are enjoying it, so we'll continue. Now we'll get to Nicene Christianity. What's that all about? Well, we've done the Apostolic Age, the Age of the Apostles, the Great Church. Now we'll see what this is all about. The Arians. What do we know about the Arians? I can hear a man screaming in German in the back of my head. Inviting people. Thank you. I appreciate that. What do we think of when we think of Arians? Auf der Heide Blut. I actually have no idea. Ein kleines Blümelein. Und das heißt. Arian Christians are actually they're not. All right, guys, time for a lesson. We're not allowing heresy in the chat. All right, look at this sad weirdo. Now, while Christianity had just witnessed its greatest triumph in its history, it would soon face its first major internal challenge within just a couple of years. Arius was a priest in Alexandria who publicly criticized his bishop, Pope Alexander I of Alexandria. And yes, by the way, the bishops of Alexandria are also known as popes, not to be confused with the Roman guy. And he was publicly criticized because he was blurring the distinction between the Father and the Son, aka Jesus, in 318. He believed that only the Father is infinite, eternal, and almighty, and therefore he was more divine than Jesus, who is not eternal but was made a god by the Father. This was why Jesus was subordinate to him. In 321, Arius was denounced at a synod at Alexandria for heresy, but the conflict became serious enough for something more. The Arian controversy, and surprisingly this has nothing to do with blue eyes and blonde hair. 325 is actually one of the most important years in Christian history. 17 centuries ago, I should make a video about this actually, because it was in this year that the faith would be truly defined, but it also set the precedent for many formal church splits in history. The Arian controversy had become big enough that by that time that Emperor Constantine chose to call an assembly of bishops across the empire to address it. Around 250 to 300 bishops, mostly from the Eastern Roman Empire, attended. It was like the Great Homie Meetup after the persecution. Kind of cool. Now this would come to be known as the First Council of Nicaea, and its purpose was to determine the nature of Jesus and his relationship with the Father. Spoiler alert, it was a father-son relationship. No, I'm kidding. I'll get to it. Let's learn a little bit about the First Council of Nicaea. So here we have it. There's Constantine over here. Arius' main opponent at the council was a young archdeacon named Athanasius of Alexandria. In fact, Athanasius and Arius beat even my record for the longest debate ever because they went at it for 2 months. Like many of you guys, some people got fed up with the debate, and St. Nicholas, who is the real Santa Claus, by the way, stood up and just straight up slapped Arius in the face. Soon after, the majority of bishops agreed upon a creed that summarized their beliefs. The creed, by the way, is like, just a list of beliefs. It has nothing to do with Assassin's Creed. And this is known as the Nicene Creed. The creed stated that the Father and the Son shared the same essence, and the council concluded on the 19th of June. As a result of the council, the emperor exiled Arius and his 2 main supporters. And this is Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, just slapping Arian in the face. This picture actually goes really hard, and it's really well made. I don't know. Tell me what you guys think about this in the chat. I have high energy. Yeah, it's kind of funny because I actually was very tired when I started this. Trinitarian worship cringe. We might have to ban this guy. We might have to ban. I'm kidding. We will not ban this guy, but yeah. Anyways, continuing on. Legacy of the First Council of Nicaea. Other achievements of the First Council of Nicaea was the decision to no longer rely on the Jewish calendar to choose the date of Easter, because essentially, for those of you who don't know, Jesus, he actually died on Passover. Passover is one of the biggest events in the Jewish calendar, remembering the Israelites leaving Egypt, but it was subject to change, and so they'd been using the Jewish calendar up until then. Now, the first church laws, known as canons, were set out that, among other things, banned women and men who took vows of chastity from living together. I mean, that kind of makes sense. It banned kneeling on Sundays for some reason, and during Pentecost, and most importantly, banned clergy from cutting off their testicles, because was this like a problem back then? I really don't know. I mean, clearly must have been bad enough that they had to ban it. Now, while the council successfully defined and answered one of the most important theological questions, it also created the first major Christian split. From now on, the 2 formal Christian sects were the Nicenes and the Arians. So now we have Christianity in 325. So we can see even since the last 25 years, it's spread a lot. So we can see now southern Spain, northern Morocco, more and more parts of Italy had become Christian, more of Gaul as well. Now we have southern Gaul as well. Pretty much this entire area had become Christian by now. Constantinople, which is located here, by the way. Actually, I'll get to Constantinople very soon. This area had become Christian as well. And we can see pretty much the entire Christian world was Nicene. But wait a second, what's this little thing here? This is where the Arians were. And as I said, Arius was kicked out of I don't know if he's kicked out of the Roman Empire, but he was definitely exiled, and so a lot of his followers would be those outside the Roman Empire. So he started converting people in what is now modern-day Hungary. Now let's look at Constantine's reforms. So this is Constantine, looking very Roman. He made many changes, such as abolishing crucifixion. I mean, that's kind of nice, and also as a Christian emperor, it would be weird if you allowed that. And making Sunday an official day of rest in 321, because keep in mind, a lot of Christians up until then had still worshipped on Saturday, because that was the traditional day for the Sabbath. He also abolished the branding of slaves on their faces. I didn't even know they did that. That's crazy. They would just brand people in their faces. And banned gladiatorial games in 325. Honestly, this sounds like this guy sounds great. Improving the Roman Empire a lot. And starting in 324, he even built a new Rome in the town of Byzantium, which would be the capital of the reunited and now Christian Roman Empire. Unlike old Rome, the city, which was soon named Constantinople, would use Christian architecture with churches in its walls and would have no pre-existing pagan temples. Wow, this is just like win after win. What a legend. The Christian emperor. With no more government support, many pagan temples began to close, and prominent Romans who refused to convert were denied positions of power. Within Constantinople, Constantine ordered the construction of the Church of Hagia Irene to celebrate his victory over co-emperor Licinius in 324. The city was finally completed in 330, and in Constantine's mausoleum, Christian liturgies were practiced. Constantine's rule set the precedent for what a Christian leader should be like, with bishops defining doctrine and the emperor enforcing it, as well as rooting out heresy and upholding church unity. So that's a solid S-tier ruler right there, Constantine. We like this guy. And look how beautiful the city is. Like, I would like to live here. I mean, they also probably I shouldn't say probably, they didn't have like toilets and all that, so yeah, I would rather be here where I am now. But for the time, this was literally the largest and most important city in the world, and it does look very cool. Anyways, let's check in on the chat here. I'm glad you're enjoying the drinks. Sorry to hear, about your grandma, but I hope this is making things a little better. John Powell. Okay, I don't think I've ever seen you, but thank you for the comment. I do generally appreciate it. And welcome, by the way. Let's go, 7 viewers. Woo! All right, let's keep going. All right, Cenobitic monasticism. So we went over this a little bit. Let's go in more detail. Who's this guy? So Cenobitic monasticism was really started out by Pachomius the Great. Pachomius had actually been a pagan, but he was so impressed by how kind Christians were that he converted. 329, he created the first Pachomian monasteries, which were collections of buildings surrounded by a wall. The monks lived in houses which each held around 40 people. Each monastery would then have around 30 to 40 houses. So for those of you who are good with math, you can do 40 times 40. That's not really my thing. I think that would be 1,200 roughly, which is a lot actually for a monastery. Cenobitic monasteries were more common in southern Egypt, while Eremitic monasteries, so those for the loners, were more common in northern Egypt, which was closer to civilization. As such, that model became the norm and was copied elsewhere. Or was Cenobitic the one for... bro, I don't even know, man. This is how bad my memory is. Now let's look at the spread of monasticism. Monasticism continues to develop as it spread outwards from Egypt, starting with Anthony's disciple Hilarion and his friend Epiphanius of Salamis. Who even has friends with names like this? Hilarion, Epiphanius of Salamis. Anyways, they founded monasteries in Palestine in 330. A few miles away from Jerusalem, Cheriton the Confessor, these are such interesting names, founded the first lavra in 332, a type of monastery consisting of a cluster of cells for hermits with a church at the center. In 356, Anthony the Great died at the age of 105, and Athanasius the Great wrote his biography of him the following year, popularizing the monastic life, especially in the Western Roman Empire. And that's so interesting that, the New York Times bestsellers of the times were how to be a monk, essentially. And now, unfortunately, death of Constantine. 337, Constantine finally got baptized. Took him a long time. Now, he did this, though, because he believed that if he got baptized closer to death, he would have a lower chance of sinning and therefore going to hell. This is an interesting way of approaching Christianity. Now, he was actually baptized by Eusebius of Nicomedia, who was an Arian priest, since despite the Council of Nicaea, most major court positions in the Eastern Roman Empire were actually held by Arians and not Nicenes. Constantine was arguably the most influential Christian ever since the Apostolic Age, single-handedly enabling the rapid spread of Christianity in the most powerful country on earth, and setting the course for its future ever since. Rest in peace, King. Boom. Look at that jawline. This guy was mewing. This guy was definitely mewing back in the 4th century. What a Chad. Alright, let's check in the chat real quick. Alright, not much going on. Hope y'all are liking it so far. Take a 1-minute break and then we'll continue. Constantine did nothing wrong. You're right. You're right about that. The entire history of the beginning. I mean, obviously, we are going to go through the entire history, but I can't do that all in one day. Like, we'd literally be here like 6 hours or something. So, we're only going over the beginning, and then I'll kind of just end like when y'all are kind of like tired or like I'm not feeling it anymore. But yeah, we're not going to make it to 2020 like tonight. That's for sure. Why am I saying 2020? It's going to be 2025. So Frumentius was a boy from Tyre in Lebanon who was on a trip to India, but whose ship was attacked in the Red Sea. Looks like there were Somali pirates even back then. The entire crew was massacred except him and his brother, or maybe it was the Houthis. The entire crew was massacred except him and his brother, who became slaves of the king of Aksum in modern Ethiopia. They were eventually freed and educated the prince named Izana. The brothers encouraged Christians to openly practice their faith and converted some locals. They returned to the Roman Empire, where Frumentius was appointed as bishop by Athanasius of Alexandria. Frumentius then returned to Aksum and converted and then baptized King Izana. There they are, the buddies, Frumentius and Izana. Thus, by the 320s or 340s, Aksum's king had converted to Christianity, and under his guidance, Frumentius built many churches and spread the gospel throughout the country. He also established the first monastery in Aksum. In 356, Roman Emperor Constantius II wrote to Izana requesting him to replace Frumentius with Theophilos the Indian, who was an Arian just like the emperor. But Izana just was like, nah, and he blocked him. Frumentius also created the Ge'ez script, the first and only native script in Africa, and still is the script used in Ethiopia to this day. Now, there's this guy, Shapur II. He looks like a good Chad, but he's not that cool. Rome's greatest rival was Iran, and after its conversion to Christianity, Iran's Christian population came under suspicion, kind of understandable, for being potentially loyal to Rome. As a result, King Shapur II ordered the first Iranian persecution of Christians in 340, ordering the destruction of churches and the execution of clergy who refused to worship the sun. This persecution would continue for nearly 25 years, mainly focused on the Christian leaders. Since Zoroastrianism was a state religion, those who converted away from it were treated the worst. Only Shapur's death in 379 truly ended the persecution. Meanwhile, by 350, Christians already made up over half of the population of the Roman Empire, being 56.5%. And just as a reminder, right before Rome became Christian, at the start of the century, it was only 10%. So it is essentially quintupled during that 50-year period, which is very impressive. Now let's look at what Christianity looked like after Constantine. After him, the liturgical calendar began to change. In 336, Pope Mark began the celebration of Christmas. 3 years later, Lent was first celebrated as a time of preparation for Easter. After Constantine's death, his sons split up the empire. Constantine II and Constans fought for the Western Roman Empire, while Constantius II took the East. And yes, if these all sound way too similar to each other, I know, I can barely tell the difference between Constans, Constantius, and Constantine. He could give his sons more original names. Now, Constans and Constantius banned state sacrifices in 341, but they did not close the pagan temples until 356. However, there was not unity, since Constantius was an Arian and appointed Arian bishops and expelled Nicene bishops. So, this is Constantius II. In 359, the Council of Ariminum was held, being called by Constantius II to resolve the Arian controversy, and was resolved in favor of the Nicene Creed. But when the messengers were sent to the emperor, it accepted an Arian creed. Since this pleased literally nobody, the Council of Constantinople was held the next year, which tried to create a compromise that accepted both positions. In 361, Constantius II died and was succeeded by his cousin Julius, who was also Christian, but it would soon turn out that there would be a dark twist. Julian the Cringe, this is him, looking like a philosopher. There's a reason for that. Julian was a philosopher, and once he took the throne, he renounced Christianity and became a pagan, so boo F in the chat. Now, he did not ban Christianity, but he did want to reestablish pagan rule, which is bad enough. He realized that in order to survive, paganism would need to adopt some Christian elements, so he tried to reform it by establishing public charity and an episcopal structure based on the structure of the Christian church. He also reopened pagan temples, boo, accepted heretical bishops, boo, promoted Judaism, boo. Luckily, his super cringe changes ended when he died, fighting the Iranians in 363. So after only 2 years, good riddance. Now we get to the worship of Mary. This is going to be controversial, but whatever. Now this actually here, this icon here, I think is actually the oldest known depiction of Mary, which is interesting. Now, just as in previous times, the 4th century saw a large-scale shift in Christian doctrine, the second half seeing the greatest changes since the late 2nd century great changes began. Most notably, the position of Mary changed with the idea of Mary being sinless, becoming a common belief by this time. This was also when she started being referred to as the Queen of Heaven and as a mediator between humans and God. The first consecrations of people to Mary also began at this time. When we get to the saints, here's one of the earliest depiction of saints, and we can also see, of course, Mary has the most important position here. Now, in addition to her, the positions of the saints also changed when non-martyred saints began being venerated for the first time, and the first reliquaries, which contained their relics, so in other words, basically pieces of their body, were being created. As such, All Saints' Day began being celebrated, and we also first saw Mass as it exists in its common form today in all the old traditional churches. In Christian art, these things, halos, which I'm sure you all know anyways, now began being used for these new saints. By now, Easter had also completely stopped being celebrated according to the Jewish calendar. Now, of course, what would Christianity be without the Bible? And we've kind of not really mentioned it. So let's talk about the beginning of the Christian Bible. As Christianity began to be consolidated, it became more and more necessary to start determining which books were scripture, since nobody had really bothered to do so yet. Now, Marcion, as we saw from before, did try, but, it wasn't really that successful. Now, in the letter he wrote on Easter 367, Athanasius of Alexandria gave a list of books that would be the 27 New Testament book canon, which is used by all Christians to this day. In 382, Pope Damasus I, and by the way, I talked a lot about him in my Who Was the First Pope video. He held a council in Rome, which was the first to accept the Catholic canon as it exists today. The next year, he commissioned Jerome to create a Latin edition of the Bible known as the Vulgate, which would determine the canon in Western Christianity. And this is Pope Damasus, who I personally would argue is the first person who is actually the Pope in the modern sense of the word, but go watch my video on the Pope for more about that. Alright folks, let's check in on the chat. How are we all doing? How are we enjoying it? I assume John Powell's a Catholic. And by the way, I'm not here to, bash anyone. Let's see. Based for promoting Julian. No, Julian is not based. Tyre is pronounced Tyre. Tier? Let's see. Well, good. Julian was cringe. Yes. We don't like Julian. Julian deserved what he got. Of course, Uncle Sam would like Julian. Does not surprise me at all. All right. Just before I continue, do we want to continue or do we want to end the stream here? It's up to you guys. Write in the chat if you want to continue the stream. Oh, things are getting personal. Continue. Yes. Let's go. Yo, we have so many new people. I don't know who this Only Funny guy is. Welcome to the chat. Thank you for coming. I'm glad for once we don't have all the same people, because obviously, all my stuff, we have Sir Welch and Uncle Sam and World Builders, but it's nice to see you new people. All right, folks, let's move on to Roman Christianity. All right, Rome officially converts. Because yes, up until this entire time we've been talking, Rome has still officially been pagan. So, on the 27th of February 380, one of the most important dates in Christian history occurred as the new Roman Emperor Theodosius I adopted Nicene Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Up until then, the empire had still been officially pagan, and the previous emperors had been Arian, which in my eyes are not Christian. Oh yeah, another thing I should say in this presentation, even groups who almost everyone would agree are not really Christians, like the Arians, we're just calling them Christians because this is just for all self-identified Christians. Whether we or I personally believe they are Christians. So I don't consider Arian Christians, but whatever. From now on, Arians, correctly, were to be referred to as heretics, while Nicenes would be referred to as part of the Catholic, aka Universal Church. Starting in 385, the first official execution for heresy in Christian history happened, with that being the execution of Priscillian, the Bishop of Avila. Now, this actually over here is Emperor Theodosius, the Gigachad, who became the first, well, not the first Christian emperor, but the one who officially converted the empire. So now let's look at what Christianity 380. So we can see by 380, actually, most of the Roman Empire was already Christian. Now, for those of you who don't know, I assume most of you do, but for those of you who don't know, essentially the Roman borders went something like this, this, and then over here, like this, this, and this. So we can see that clearly the vast majority of the Roman Empire was Christian by this point. Pretty much all of Northwest Africa, large parts of Egypt, Ethiopia, as we see, which got converted by Frumentius, parts of Arabia, pretty much the entire eastern part, half of Anatolia, more of the Caucasus, pretty much all of Greece, most of Italy, most of Gaul, even large parts of the Balkan were now becoming Christians. And we can see that basically everyone is a Nicene Christian, though we still have the little group of Arians stand out strong over here. Gotta watch out for them. Now let's get to the First Council of Constantinople. In order to consolidate this now official religion, Theodosius called a second ecumenical council known as the First Council of Constantinople in 381. Theodosius had actually kicked out the Bishop of Constantinople, Demophilus, for refusing to convert to Nicene Christianity, which ended 40 years of Arian bishops there. Thus, part of the council goal was to confirm the appointment of the new bishop Gregory of Nazianzus, this guy over here. The council condemned Arianism and other heresies, elevated the Bishop of Constantinople to be the second most important in the empire after the Pope, and confirmed Gregory's appointment as its bishop. What's the legacy of this council? The main legacy of the council would be the modification of the Nicene Creed to its modern form, which was done to address the divinity of the Holy Spirit, because up until then, not everyone was sure whether the Holy Spirit was God as much as the Father or Jesus were. Now, a group known as the Pneumatomachie denied its divinity, so the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, now try saying that 12 times, explicitly affirmed the Holy Spirit as being God and proceeding from the Father. This, by the way, is an important thing. We'll see this later on. Maybe not on this stream, but in later streams, you'll see this part here will become important. Another legacy, though, was much less spiritual, since the first time Constantinople was explicitly referred to as New Rome, and this would create tensions between the bishops of Constantinople and Rome over who had the highest authority. This will also become important, so watch out for that. Now we get the spread of monasticism. Around 370, Basil of Caesarea began writing about his monastic ideal. I mean, modern day people, we write about our ideal of like becoming buff or, I don't know, going to Japan. This guy was talking about being a monk. How far we've fallen. Answering many common questions and providing a pattern for others to follow. He thus became the example of monasticism in the eastern part of the empire. I imagine this guy would be like a monk influencer today. Up until the late 4th century, monasticism was mostly, though, just in the Eastern Roman Empire, but began spreading to the west through figures such as Martin of Tours, who established monasteries in Gaul in 372. John Cassian had began studying monasticism in 385 in Egypt and Palestine, and was very impressed by the hermits, but found that they were quite rare. Around 410, he established 2 monasteries, one for each gender. And sorry, if you believe they're more like this isn't the stream for you. Cappadocian Fathers. Look at these 3. Cappadocian fathers were three church fathers from Cappadocia in the late 4th century. These were Basil of Caesarea, his brother Gregory of Nyssa, and their friend Gregory of Nazianzus. And Gregory of Nazianzus, if you remember, he was the bishop of Constantinople. All three of them would become bishops, and all of them would be instrumental in the development of the Trinity, which is kind of funny because they had their own little Trinity going on. Not saying that to be blasphemous, by the way. They contributed to the development of Marian theology and devotion and affirmed the doctrine of Mary's perpetual virginity, with Gregory of Nyssa stating that she had made a vow of virginity. Gregory of Nazianzus taught that Mary was purified in her soul and body before conceiving Jesus. He also introduced the idea of Marian invocation, while Gregory of Nyssa also recorded the first Marian apparition. So in other words, basically he said that Mary appeared to him, usually in the form of vision. That's how these things happen. Now we get to the introduction of more Catholic doctrines. As the 4th century came to a close, more theological changes happened, such as the introduction of the concept of mortal sins in 385, and the 7 deadly sins around this time too. Very well known. Actually, it's weirdly enough, our buddy World Builder Ministries in the chat, who's not even a Christian, knows way more about those than I do. By 390, it had become the only acceptable view that Mary remained a virgin her whole life, and she began to be referred to as the Mother of the Church. Music and churches dedicated to Mary began being created. Pope Siricius, who was also a contender, I believe, for the first actual pope, also began to assert papal authority more fully by declaring that no bishop could take their office without his approval. Melania the Elder, meanwhile, created the first convent in history in 379, so that's just a monastery for women specifically, and in 397, the first calendar of saints was created. And this actually is Melania the Elder, and this was actually made, I believe, during her lifetime, so this is one of the oldest ever depictions of a saint around the time that they lived. Now, let's look at the creation of the Bible in the Roman Empire. In 393, the Synod of Hippo, Hippo, by the way, is a city, has nothing to do with the animal, was held, which was the first time a full Christian Bible was approved, corresponding to the modern Catholic Bible. This canon of scripture was confirmed at the Council of Carthage in 397. Thus, by the end of the 4th century, the Bible was fully settled in the Western Roman Empire, while in the Eastern Roman Empire, Revelation would gradually become accepted as scripture, although they cared a lot less about a strict list of books, which, coming from someone who is a Protestant and just a Western Christian in general, that's a very weird concept. But this does mean that Eastern Christianity, even today, has a wide variety of books that are considered scripture. Now let's look at the Bible outside the Roman Empire. Outside the Roman Empire, these changes mattered less, and each church developed their own distinct biblical canon. By the 5th century, the Syriac Church has settled on their own canon that excluded 2 John, 3 John, 2 Peter, Jude, and Revelation, and this remains the case to this day in Nestorian churches. Wow, I did not know that. Also, they're missing a lot of the New Testament. Like, how do you read the Bible and not include Revelation? It's literally like the culmination of everything. In Armenia, they included 3 Corinthians, never heard of that, but not Revelation for some reason until 1200. Meanwhile, Ethiopia was the most liberal in its inclusion of scripture, and its Bible had at least 81 books, but can even go up to 88. Now that's crazy. Anyways, let's check it on the chat, see how everyone's doing, how you guys are enjoying it. Okay, so there's a good amount. I'm still in the stream, just so you know. Huh? I'm still in the stream, just so you know. Anyways, when the word Catholic was first used, the capital C. I mean, I guess they didn't, to be, not that this is really an answer, but you know, there wasn't really capitalization back in the day, so technically there's no answer to that. I once knew proud sedevacantist Catholic. There's one in my server right now, actually, who praised all 4 members of the Trinity. Bruh, that's crazy. Sounds like one of your trolls, actually. Also, John Powell, if you haven't joined my server, you should. I appreciate you watching and commenting. That's based. Alright. Oh no, we're losing viewers. Okay, back to the show. Back to the show, everyone. Okay, the Goths become Christian. Dead end. Now, unlike what you might think, the Goths were not actually just a sad group of depressed weirdos wearing all black, but was actually the name of a tribe from what is in modern-day Sweden. Arianism was to prove quite popular with the Germanic tribes living outside of Rome, with Ulfilas becoming the first bishop of a tribe known as the Goths. Between 348 and 383, he translated the Bible into Gothic. However, after the Goths got destroyed by the Huns between 372 and 375, the survivors began migrating to the Roman Empire, marking the beginning of the barbarian invasions of Rome. Rome's downfall really began in 395 when it was split between West and East. Although for the last 110 years there had been this on and off Western and Eastern Roman emperors, after Theodosius I's death, the division became permanent. This is not accurate. No one was invading Rome naked, but it is a very cool and dramatic picture, which is why I included it. Now, following a very bitterly cold winter in 409, the Rhine River, which formed the boundary of the Western Roman Empire, just straight up froze. And this allowed many Germanic tribes to just waltz across the border and migrate throughout the empire. One of these tribes, the Vandals, settled in southern Spain, and by doing so turned it Arian. And just like the Goths, the Vandals, they weren't what the modern name implies. Now, another group known as the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410, something which had not happened for exactly 800 years. It was clear how weak the Western Romans were becoming, and the Visigoths soon settled in southern Gaul, turning it Arian as well. Now, during the 420s, the Vandals crossed into North Africa and settled there, spreading Arianism and graffiti as they went. I'm sure Uncle Sam is feeling very emotional about this. He's going to be like, bring back Rome! Oh, no, never mind. He's just talking about how he hates religion. Alright, BRB. Alright, we'll see you soon, world builders. Uncle Sam, I need you to make a comment about the fall of Rome. I know you want to say something about it. While I wait, I'm just going to refill my water during the stream. Thank you. Fall of Rome was a tragedy. I was expecting more poetic words from you, but that's fine. Bro, only 4 viewers. Yo. Augustine of Hippo. One if not the most important church father in Western Christianity is Augustine of Hippo, who's both a theologian and philosopher. Like what you think, Augustine was not actually morbidly obese, he just ended up becoming the bishop of Hippo. He was born in modern Algeria to a Christian mother, Saint Monica, but resisted Christianity. He instead took a side chick and became a Manichaean. 2 things you should not do, especially becoming a Manichaean, although maybe taking a side chick is more of a common problem these days. Now, after his conversion to Christianity, he became the bishop of Hippo and opposed heresies such as Pelagianism, which is the belief that you can just be saved by being a good person, which totally isn't still very popular today. He also wrote the Confessions, often considered the first autobiography in Western history, and is actually something I read in full, which is kind of interesting. And let's look at his theology. This is Augustine here. He was the first person to develop the doctrine of original sin as well as just war. Just war isn't necessarily thought of that much, but original sin is very important. After Rome was sacked by the Visigoths, many Christians began having doubts about their faith, leading Augustine to develop the doctrine of the church as being the city of God, which was distinct from the city of man. It is often said that Augustine was the first medieval philosopher, and his views influenced the worldview of the Middle Ages. In fact, I studied Augustine in a class called Medieval Philosophy. Now, just in case you thought we were done with controversies, oh boy, are you wrong. Let's look at this guy, Nestorius, also looking a little goofy. Now, 428, Nestorius was appointed as Archbishop of Constantinople. He argued that Jesus' human and divine natures were distinct, so he didn't want to refer to Mary as the mother of God, but only as the mother of Christ. The Patriarch of Alexandria, Cyril, took issue with this, and the two started beefing with each other. Cyril appealed to Pope Celestine I, who condemned Nestorius as a heretic. Cyril then sent a letter to Nestorius, excommunicating him for heresy. This resulted in the Third Ecumenical Council being held at Ephesus in 431 by Eastern Roman Emperor Theodosius II, and 250 bishops attended. Now we get to the Council of Ephesus, which condemned Nestorius and his followers as heretics and excommunicated them. It declared that Jesus was one person with both a human and a divine nature, and that Mary was indeed the mother of God, because Jesus was God. Although Theodosius II had supported Nestorius, the council caused him to switch sides, and Nestorius was removed from his position as archbishop. But if you think he gave up, you're wrong. His followers just created a separate church known as the Church of the East, which became the standard form of Christianity in Iran, whose church officially declared independence from the Roman Church in 424, which was actually a move encouraged by the Iranian monarchy, even though they themselves were not Christians. So this is the Council of Ephesus. This is them essentially praising the fact of declaring Mary as the mother of God. So now we look at Christianity in 431. Doesn't look tremendously different, but you can see now we have a whole new denomination over here, the Nestorians, and it follows almost perfectly the Roman-Iranian border. So we can see essentially the ones in, and by the way, old Iranian, obviously this is all Iraq now, but you can see over here, all these Christians are Nestorians, the rest are Nicenes, but we can also see Arianism has now begun to spread with the Germanic tribes, so still more here in Hungary, but also as we can see where the Vandals settled over here in Algeria, those became Arian, more down here with the Visigoths, same over here. The Suevi also became Arians, and so that's why there's an Arianism here. And Christianity has also been spreading actually outside the Roman borders over here into Scotland. So, interesting map. Let's check in on the chat now. Oh, let's go. We're back to 6 viewers. But yeah, do we have any thoughts on Nestorian controversy or anything else kind of being said at this moment? Based. Let's go Uncle Sam. The atheist is my #1 fan. Based. I mean, yeah, I can get that. I mean, from your perspective, I understand why the Trinitarian heresies don't make sense to you. Here's the thing. Do I agree with Chalcedon? I do agree. Do I think it was worth excommunicating over it? No. I do think the Arian controversy was justified because that is a very important distinction. But with Nestorius, it's like, nah, I don't really think so. Anyways, let's continue. Now, if you thought there was one Council of Ephesus, you stand corrected. One of Nestorius' main enemies was a priest named Eutyches, who opposed him so much so that he ended up teaching equally extreme views, which was that Jesus did not even have two natures. In reaction, the Second Council of Ephesus was held in 449, attended by 126 Eastern Roman bishops and only one Western Roman bishop. The council affirmed Eutyches' teaching, and Pope Leo I was also declared a heretic, which is kind of funny. We also have a Pope Leo right now in power, and hopefully he doesn't get declared as a heretic. After this happened, 1,000 monks gathered outside and murdered the Archbishop of Constantinople, Flavian, who had condemned Eutyches. So it looks like people had toxic fan bases even back then. And it was widely rumored that Pope Dioscorus I of Alexandria was responsible. This would be great YouTube beef, by the way. I mean, except for the fact that they actually killed the guy. Alrighty. Alright, folks. Just checking in. Do we want to continue the stream or end it here? Let me know. Alright, let's continue based. Any other opinions? Yo, anyone else in the chat? Folks in the chat? Yeah, actually I should do that. Explain the Trinity. I'll get roasted in the comments for sure. But yeah. Alright, well anyways, I'm just going to continue because no one else is saying anything. Let's move on to Chalcedonian Christianity. So yeah, in case you thought we're done with arguing over Christ's nature, you're wrong. So this is Pope Leo I, the first pope to be called Leo, and as we know now, definitely not the last. Now, Pope Leo I had never accepted the results of the Second Council of Ephesus. Maybe has something to do with the fact that they excommunicated him, and he demanded a new council. In 450, a new man rose to the throne of the Eastern Roman Empire, Marcion, who called for a fourth ecumenical council. By the way, those are the universal councils we've been discussing. The Council of Chalcedon began on the 8th of October 451 and saw the remains of the murdered Archbishop Flavian buried honorably. Although Leo had been asked to preside over the council, he just decided to bail and never even attended, even though he was the one who wanted it. However, 520 bishops attended, making it the most attended ecumenical council. Pope Dioscorus was not allowed to attend and was actually put in solitary confinement. Bit harsh. Now, Dioscorus was condemned by the council, but what he really grinded the gears of Empress Pulcheria, who slapped him in the face just like Santa had done at Nicaea, because apparently this seems to be like a running tradition at these ecumenical councils. Dioscorus was further punished by Emperor Marcion by being exiled, and in response to his teachings, the Chalcedonian definition was created. It defined that Jesus was acknowledged in two natures which came together in one person. Those who opposed it insisted that Jesus' two natures had united into one during his incarnation. The council also declared the Bishop of Constantinople equal to that of Rome, something which Pope Leo I fiercely opposed. It was like Pope Leo I kind of just had an ego problem, not gonna lie. So, this is the Council of Chalcedon. I forget if this is Dioscorus or not. I don't even know, man. I think it is. I'm pretty sure this is Pope Dioscorus. So what are the results? Council of Chalcedon led to the third major schism in Christianity, which took an ethnic dimension as well. European and Asian Eastern Roman Christians became Chalcedonians, while African Eastern Roman Christians became non-Chalcedonians, centered around Egypt. In that province, the 30,000 Chalcedonians, mostly Greek, were outnumbered by the 5 million Oriental Orthodox Egyptians. The Oriental Orthodox are those who sided with Pope Dioscorus of Alexandria and did not accept the Chalcedonian definition. As such, the Nicene Church was now dead and officially split into the Chalcedonian and Oriental Orthodox churches. It is also this council that is generally considered the last valid ecumenical council by Protestants. And as a Protestant, I also agree with this. We'll get to the later councils later. But I do have to say, though, this easily to me seems like the most pointless church split ever. Like, I understand this is important, but this is like getting into minute Trinitarian debates. And so now here is a map of Christianity in 451. So we can see by this time basically the entire Eastern Roman Empire is Christian. Greece almost fully Christian, Anatolia almost fully Christian, Syria fully Christian, the Levant fully Christian, even parts of Arabia, and then Italy. Italy is also fully Christian. Same with Gaul, basically fully Christian. Most of Spain, pretty much all of North Africa. But we can also see, right, that there's increasing division. So the Arians have been spreading more in Spain. They've taken over the province of Africa, so Tunisia. And then we can also see here, right, that the Oriental Orthodox are now in Africa, right? Egypt, Ethiopia, and a little bit over here, which is kind of a sign for the future. Now we get to the missionary slave. 431, Pope Celestine I consecrated a man named Palladius as a bishop to minister to the Irish, although little is known of his results. But the most well-known missionary to Ireland is, of course, St. Patrick, who lived sometime during the 5th century. Now, Patrick was born at the end of Roman rule in Britain, so don't remind the Irish that St. Patrick was British. The son of a deacon and grandson of a priest. At age 16, he was captured by Irish pirates and was then enslaved for 6 years, after which he escaped back to Britain. After being consecrated by Maximus, I, Bishop of Turin, he returned to Ireland as a missionary. While there, he converted many people, although few records exist concerning the details of his activities. And he wasn't even the first Christian there, unlike what many think. But there he is, St. Patrick, returning to the island. So, what was the results of this? Well, Irish monasticism. Irish monks lived a life of strict prayer and discipline, in which prayer, poverty, and obedience were the main goals. They needed to learn Latin, and by the end of the 7th century, the Irish monastic schools were attracting students from across England and Europe more broadly. Columbanus, an abbot and missionary, traveled to Francia in the late 6th century to spread Irish monasticism on the continent. Many monasteries were built under the patronage of Childebert II, the king of Austrasia. Columbanus later traveled to the kingdom of the Lombards, where King Agilulf let him set up a monastery at Bobbio. And now we get the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Now, just as the church was falling apart, so was the Western Roman Empire, which was getting gradually conquered by waves of Germanic invaders. In 476, the pathetic remnant of the Western Roman Empire ended when the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by Odoacer, who became the king of Italy. With this event, there was no longer any empire to wield political power, and the church replaced it. And for the next half millennium, Western civilization was preserved primarily by monks. The Aryan Germanic rulers established their own churches while remaining tolerant of the Chalcedonian majority. So that's quite something. Oh wow, we're getting so many like new people in the chat. That's cool. And we know he's Welsh, not British. I mean, Welsh people are British. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't English. You're right. Patrick was not an Englishman. Irish Protestant here, not Union. That's interesting. Irish monks are also known for expanding the use of spaces between words. I did not know that. The Celts in Britain were just called the Welsh. That's true. I mean, yeah. I mean, if St. Patrick was anything today, he would be Welsh. That's correct. Anyways, this is Romulus Augustulus, the final Roman emperor, surrendering to Odoacer. He looks very happy with the whole situation. So what does Christianity look like after the fall of Western Rome? Well, as the Germanic tribes established their various kingdoms in what used to be the Roman Empire, Western Roman Empire, they spread their Arian or their pagan faiths. The Vandals had established Arianism in much of North Africa. The Visigoths and Suebi had done the same in Iberia. The Lombards had settled Lombardy, and the Ostrogoths settled large parts of the northeast Balkans. It seemed like the Western Chalcedonian Church, now without state support, had little chance. But in 507, the strongest Germanic kingdom, the kingdom of the Franks, converted to Chalcedonian Christianity when their king Clovis I was baptized. To learn more about Clovis, you can also watch my video, Charles III's Ancestry Part 1. You learn all about him there. I always got to plug my own videos, but here he is, Clovis getting baptized. So now this is what Christianity looks like in 500. So half a millennium in, not bad. So we can very clearly see the old borders of the Roman Empire, right? We see all of Iberia is now Christian. Almost all of Gaul is Christian. All of Italy is Christian. Most of North Africa, with the exception of this area, was Christian. Anatolia, fully Christian. Greece, fully Christian. Most of the Illyrian Balkan coast, Christian. Syria, Christian. Levant, Christian. Egypt, Christian. Ethiopia as well. The Caucasus. But we can see, right, there's been some changes. Now, one of the biggest changes we see here, right, is that the Arians had taken over large parts. So, of course, we had the Vandals who were always here, same with the Visigoths, the Suebi. But one of the biggest changes is the Lombards, as I mentioned, settled here in Lombardy, which is named after them, spreading Arianism with them. And then also the Ostrogoths, who had conquered this area, now converted that area over to Arianism as well. We can also see the spread over here.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at night you need to close that curtain because you got your computer equipment here.
Alright, what's good, everyone? Y'all still hear me? If you can, just write yes in the chat. Alright, nice. Got my cat with me here, but camera's off, so maybe I'll turn it on at the end so you can see him. Alright, nice. So, back to what we were talking about. Yeah, so that's the map. Oh yeah, the other thing is Oriental Orthodoxy now takes over Armenia and Syria. So that's a big difference between earlier when it's just Egypt and Ethiopia. As we get to the early 6th century. So, During the early 6th century, as I mentioned, Oriental Orthodoxy began spreading in the Eastern Roman Empire, resulting in the conversion of the Syrian and Armenian churches to that branch of Christianity. As such, an increasingly divided Eastern Roman Empire and a disappeared Western Roman Empire was the situation that Justinian I found himself in when he became the Eastern Roman Emperor in 527. Justinian was a big fan of venerating Christian saints, and under his reign, Mary started being referred to as the Madonna, and her birth became a feast day. He also really began the promotion of icons, which during his reign really started being venerated in and of themselves. This is Benedict. You may have heard this guy, but if not, here's his story. Now, the most influential person in the history of Western monasticism was Benedict of Nursia. He was educated in Rome, but soon became a hermit in a cave in Subiaco. And by the way, I've actually been to this place. It's quite out in the middle of nowhere, even today. Now, he soon attracted followers with whom he founded a monastery at Monte Cassino at around 520, between Rome and Naples. And in 530 he wrote the Rule of St. Benedict as a guide for monastic life. During this time, as I mentioned before, the monasteries were the main center of Western civilization, preserving crafts and art as well as intellectual culture within their schools and libraries. Eventually, though, they became just like nobles, funnily enough, with serfs tilling the land and monks studying. Many of the best in society were attracted to monasteries, which became very productive and produced a lot of knowledge. So this was kind of like, the university of the day, because universities had not yet really been invented. So now let's get on to our main character of this time, Justinian. This guy, you should be able to recognize him, but in case you don't, you'll find out. So he really had one big mission in life, and that was to reunite the Roman Empire. So in 533 he invaded the Vandal kingdom, and after doing so he managed to convert Tunisia from Arianism to Chalcedonianism. A similar result occurred in southern Spain, which he took from the Arian Visigoths. As a result of Justinian's policy, by his death in 565, Arianism had basically disappeared from Africa. He had a large influence on the church, believing that the Eastern Roman Empire could only be united if its church was also united, and as such he persecuted both pagans and non-Chalcedonian Christians. Most importantly, though, Justinian was able to reconquer Rome and large parts of Italy from the Ostrogoths, bringing all 5 cities of the Pentarchy back under Roman control. Now, the Pentarchy was basically a system that assigned superior church authority to 5 sees, so essentially 5 cities. These are Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. However, the Pope never recognized this system and instead insisted that only the sees of Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch had patriarchal authority. I'm not really sure why those 3, but alright. Justinian, on the other hand, he subscribed to Caesaropapism, a doctrine that gave him the authority to dictate the theological opinions of the church. Now we get to the 3 chapters controversy, which, trust me, if you thought the other controversies were dumb, this is even more stupid. So, this 3-chapter controversy was a reference to 3 writings that were anathematized by Emperor Justinian: the writings of Theodore of Mopsuestia, certain of Theodoret's writing, that's a different guy by the way, and the letters of Ibas of Edessa to Maris. These writings were condemned essentially for being Nestorian, and Justinian hoped that this would influence the Oriental Orthodox to reunite with the Chalcedonian Church, because essentially the Oriental Orthodox, they were like the most anti-Nestorian. Like, they were very much like, no, Jesus has one nature. But one of the people who refused to condemn the writings had to be the Pope, Vigilius in this case, and in 553 they called a second Council of Constantinople to resolve this issue. Alright, let's check in on the chat real quick. Let's see what's going on. Roman Alexandria makes sense. Antioch, Alameo. Yeah, I know what you mean. let's go. That's 7 people. Good, bro. Now the chat in my phone. Yeah, honestly, I should do that. But also, it's kind of just nice. I kind of like the setup. Just watching things go by. Also, my phone will always just turn off or lose a bunch of battery. So. Anyways, things are good. Looking good. Let's go. We have 8. Woo! Alright. Anyways, this is the Second Council of Constantinople here. So basically, as happened before with the last time the Pope was complaining, the Pope was excommunicating, but this was not applied to the Western Church as a whole. And he was actually imprisoned in Constantinople for 6 months until he agreed to condemn the 3 chapters at the end of the year. So that's crazy. They basically blackmailed him. But this didn't even end the division, as the schism of the 3 chapters resulted from it. The bishops of Aquileia, Liguria, Emilia, Milan, and the Eastern Peninsula, all in northern Italy, refused to condemn the 3 chapters, and they actually broke communion with the Pope. So, let's look at some other stuff here. So Christianity began spreading to Scotland from the Romans, but really began picking up after they abandoned Britain in 410. And by 430, the south of Scotland was already majority Christian. By the start of the 6th century, large parts of Scotland had converted, although much of the land was pagan. By the middle of the century, most of the land had converted. Starting in the 560s, Arianism started to decline in the Visigothic kingdom, which eventually resulted in King Recared I's conversion to Chalcedonianism in 587. Alright, so here's a map now. We're 90 years later, 590. And yeah, so we can see Scotland by this point has become Christian. But we see Arianism has also basically been dying out a lot, right? Very little left in Spain. Completely gone from Africa. The Lombards are still here, though, and a bit of the Ostrogoths remain. But otherwise, geographically, kind of looks the same. But we have seen Oriental Orthodoxy has now spread, directly connecting Egypt to Ethiopia. So this whole area is Christian now. And yeah, this area is basically the same. Okay, so now the Irish go to Britain. It's kind of funny because originally it was the British sending missionaries to Ireland. So in 563, an abbot from Ireland began the Hiberno-Scottish mission, and he sailed to Scotland with 200 other missionaries to spread Christianity among the Picts, who were still pagan. A local king granted Columba ownership of the island of Iona, where he set up a very successful Bible school. His disciple Dunod established a similar Bible school in Wales, but he would soon come into conflict with incoming Roman missionary Augustine of Canterbury. So Christianity at this time was not actually new to Roman Britain, or what is now England and Wales, because after all, Constantine, right, the Giga Chad, he had actually started his career there. But it never really took much root there, while the Romans were there, and after they left, its presence just declined even more. After they left, England was taken over by the Anglo-Saxons, another Germanic group of invaders who took over the land and named it England after the Angles, who were one of their tribes. Just like many barbarians, they were pagans, but unlike the other Germanic invaders, they never actually adopted Arianism. And this is probably because the Roman presence was weaker, and so they didn't really feel the need to adopt any forms of Christianity. And so we get to the Gregorian mission. So in 595, Pope Gregory I decided to send missionaries to convert the Anglo-Saxons. The King of Kent, Ethelbert, was married to a Christian named Bertha, the daughter of Cheribert I, the King of Paris. In 597, the Gregorian mission was launched, led by Augustine and 40 monks. Ethelbert allowed the missionaries to settle and preached in his capital of Canterbury. Very soon after, he converted and pressured other Anglo-Saxon kings to do the same. In 604, Ethelbert actually managed to get fellow Anglo-Saxon king Sabert of Essex to convert as well, being baptized by Mellitus, who was one of Augustine's assistants. Mellitus was then appointed as the first bishop of London. So here we see Augustine preaching to Ethelbert over here and his family. Now we get to Raedwald, the Christian, quote unquote. We'll see why. So Raedwald is most famous for this very famous mask, known as the Sutton Hoo mask, which he wore in battle. It looks very cool. But he was not very enthusiastic about converting. He was the king of East Anglia, and he'd only converted because he'd been pressured to do so by Ethelbert. In fact, that he was actually so undedicated that literally on his way home from his baptism, he started practicing pagan practices again. However, just to stay safe, though, he had an altar built to Jesus while also keeping his altars to pagan gods. So this guy really did not internalize the message. Now, after Ethelbert's death, Raedwald became the most powerful Anglo-Saxon king and likely influenced the widespread return of paganism. Let's check in on the chat, by the way. So when I think he wants to say Dalriata invaded Scotland. Yep, that's actually where the Scots came from, Ireland. That is true. I should make a video about Ireland. Yeah, I should, honestly. That would be a good idea. King Baldwin type shit. Oh, another new guy. Pharaoh Atleutanu. Hello there. You don't have to worry about your flight, by the way, World Builder, because I don't think I'll be streaming for a while. So you'll probably be back. Your nation is dead. I mean, is it though? Because it still exists, right? What type of video would I make about Ireland? I just think the history of Ireland. Like, I've done many histories of different countries, so it's probably what I would do. Be back on August 12th. Okay, yeah, I probably will stream before August 12th. But, I'll let you know. Anyways, unfortunately, after Ethelbert's death in 616, his son Eadbald succeeded him and refused to be baptized, choosing to stick to his pagan beliefs. Unsurprisingly, those pagan beliefs led him to do weird stuff like marry his own stepmom. After Saybert's death the same year, his sons also rejected Christianity and reinstated paganism as kings Sexraid and Sayward. Yeah, those are stupid names for stupid pagan beliefs. The bishops of Rochester and London were then both compelled to leave, and Lawrence, the Bishop of Canterbury, was also going to leave, but apparently Peter came to him in a dream and convinced him to stay by literally whipping him back to his senses. And I mean literally. You can see Peter with a whip there, about to whip sleeping Lawrence of Canterbury. Nevertheless, this whipping apparently worked, because when Lawrence showed Eadbald his wounds, he broke up with his stepmom and then agreed to be baptized. He then found a new wife, Emma of Austrasia, the daughter of Theudebert II, the king of Austrasia. In 625, King Edwin of Northumbria was also looking for a wife, and then found Ethelbert of Kent, the sister of King Eadbald. She agreed as long as she could continue to practice her faith, and then the Pope tried to encourage Edwin by giving him gifts, which is definitely one way to spread the gospel. Oh, so this is King Edwin getting baptized. This is actually a really cool painting. I like this. I don't know exactly the name of the style. It's not Art Deco, but something like that. But it's really cool. I like the aesthetic. All right. Oh, welcome back, Sir Welch. Nice to see you. So, guys, just give me like a minute. I'll be back. Hello, folks. I'm back. Sorry, I just had to do a quick bathroom break. Okay, nice for some people in the chat. Also got an ice cream sandwich, so sorry. Sounds like I'm eating something, that's why. It's too cold, honestly, whatever. So the pressure worked, though. You know, the gift giving, all that. And Edwin converted in 627 in New York, weirdly with the encouragement of his pagan high priest. After Raedwald's death, he was succeeded by his son, Eorpwald of East Anglia, who was pressured or forced to convert to Christianity, depending on who you ask, by Edwin. This angered a certain Ricbert, a pagan who killed him and replaced him as king of East Anglia. Ricbert didn't last long and was soon overthrown in 630 by Eorpwald's brother Sigibert, a strong Christian who had grown up in Francia. Edwin used his new faith to consolidate power, but unfortunately he was killed in 633 in a battle against the pagan king Penda of Mercia. Now, if this wasn't complicated enough, it gets worse, since after Edwin's death, Osric took over Deira and Eanfrith took over Bernicia, with both of them being pagans. However, Eanfrith only lasted a year before being succeeded by his brother Oswald, a Christian, who was a missionary from Iona, which, if you remember, was established by Irish monks to lead a mission to convert his kingdom. However, he was so bad that he was actually kicked out and replaced by Aidan, who'd established a monastery at Lindisfarne. So there we have it. We have King Oswald meeting the missionaries. Now, the popes weren't done with England yet. In 635, Pope Honorius I sent Birinus to Wessex, where he baptized his king, Cynegils. However, in a common pattern, when Cynegils died, his son Kenwal rejected Christianity and returned to paganism. Why is it every single one of these Anglo-Saxon kings has the same story arc? He was then driven out of Wessex by Penda of Mercia, and was forced to flee to the realm of Anna of East Anglia. By the way, Anna is actually a man. And he actually got Kenwald to convert in 646. Back in Kent, Eorcin Bert took the throne in 640 and ordered all idols to be destroyed, effectively ending paganism in the kingdom. And he also appointed the first local Anglo-Saxon bishop. So that was Wessex. Now let's look at Essex. In 653, Sigebert the Good, the king of Essex, converted after meeting and being converted by Oswiu of Northumbria. Oswiu's daughter, Ealflaed, was to marry Peda, the son of pagan king Penda of Mercia, on the condition that he convert, which he did in 653. It was this event that led King Penda to allow Christian missionaries to start preaching in Mercia. Once Penda died in 655, he was succeeded by Peda and then Wulfhere, another Christian who successfully converted the kingdom during his 20-year reign. However, Essex once again reverted to paganism after a plague in 664 caused King Siggeir to reject Christianity, but he would be the last pagan king. And the final conversion of Britain. Another kingdom that reverted to paganism was Wessex. Like, guys, my goodness, the Anglo-Saxons are so unsure about whether they want to be Christian or pagan. So under King Kentwin, who became king in 676, they became pagan, but then he became a monk in 685, so I guess he returned. In 681, Wilfrid, the Bishop of York, decided to go to Sussex to convert the kingdom, since it was the last pagan Anglo-Saxon kingdom left. Makes sense, I mean, they have the word sus and sex in their name. King Ethelweel was married to a Christian woman, and therefore he chose to be baptized. Now, only one part of England was left pagan, the Isle of Wight, which was conquered by King Caedwalla of Wessex, who captured King Arwold and his sons. Arwold's sons were baptized in 686, but as a reward, they were still executed by Caedwalla anyways. And with this dramatic turn of events, the Christianization of Great Britain was finally complete. And so someone asked in the chat about Celtic Christianity. We'll get to that now. Let's check in on the chat a little bit though. Okay, so Ollie was raised Protestant, but not exactly religious. Did you watch this video because you're interested in Christian history, like due to your Christian past, or just because of like the historical aspect? Okay, nice. Also, I'm sorry about the noise. Bro, this like freaking ice cream sandwich is so cold. Bro, that's crazy. Bro, staying up till 4:17 to watch. I respect that. Also, Pharaoh, are you like? I feel like this Pharaoh guy's just trolling. Is he not? World Builder is also trolling. I can tell. That's true. It's not even really retro. He's just rage baiting. That's true. Okay. Bro, I don't need notifications. So we've seen that Christianity developed independently of papal and Roman authority in Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, and this would cause some issues. While Celtic Christianity was never a separate denomination, it did differ from Roman Christianity on the date of Easter and how priests should shave their head, because apparently these are the most important things in Christianity. Now, there were also differences in how baptism and liturgy were practiced. And abbots, instead of bishops, tended to lead Celtic churches, which were more decentralized than Roman ones. These tensions eventually came to a head as both Celtic and Roman missionaries started evangelizing England. This led to the Synod of Whitby. In 664, King Oswy of Northumbria decided to hold a council to resolve the issue and held the synod to determine the correct way of calculating when to celebrate Easter, especially as the king and queen celebrated on different days, which must have been kind of awkward, especially for the kids. Also, you've noticed I keep bringing up the date of Easter again. I mean, I've been bringing this up since, 2nd century, and that makes me an old man. I must be like 600 years old at this point, but that is because it was a recurring theme and something that caused a lot more division than I think it should have. So, Bishop Coleman of Lindisfarne defended the Celtic way of doing things, claiming that it was a tradition from Columba, while Bishop Wilfrid of York defended the Roman way by claiming it was the tradition from Peter. As a result, Oswy ruled in his favor and changed his main bishopric from Lindisfarne to York. Because I guess saying, I've been doing this since Peter sounds a little cooler than I've been doing this since Columba. The Synod of Whitby would mark the beginning of the end of Celtic Christianity, and by the mid-700s, even Iona had adopted Roman practices. And so Celtic Christianity kind of just died with a whimper. It wasn't even very dramatic. So here they are arguing with each other. That's King Oswiu. Now, the introduction of Christianity to China. In 635, Alopen, an Nestorian missionary, arrived in Chang'an with the Bible, where he was welcomed by the Chinese emperor, Gaozu of Tang. After examining the Bible, Gaozu ordered for it to be translated and preached, and even ordered for a monastery to be built in his capital. His son Taizong continued his efforts after he took the throne. Although Christians were not always treated well in China, the treatment often depended on the emperor of the time, missionaries were sent over and Christianity was generally tolerated under the Tang dynasty, which ruled until 907. So from China, Nestorianism was able to spread to Silla, now in Korea. Nestorian missionaries found even more success in converting the Turks of Central Asia. Because yes, guys, Turks are not actually originally from Turkey. It was suggested that it might have even become the dominant region of the area. Now, especially before the spread of Islam in the region, Christianity was actually doing quite well. Now, Pope Gregory I, known as Gregory the Great, was one of the most important figures in Christian history, reigning as Pope from 590 to 604. He was basically the person who changed the papacy from its classical form to its medieval form, and under his rule, the Catholic Mass as we know it developed, and the doctrine of salvation through the Church became accepted. Gregory adopted the title of Servants of God. But don't let this title fool you. It was a prime example of humble bragging. This title was meant to show that he was actually not equal to the Patriarch of Constantinople, because he was superior to him, and would show that he believed himself to be the leader of the entire church. So let's look a little bit about how the papacy was transformed during this time. So I was just finishing up my ice cream sandwich. I'm done now. No more distracting mouth noises. So this is Gregory over here. Fine fella. Now after Gregory's papacy, the institution began to change into the medieval papacy that would be its form for the next millennium. In 607, Eastern Roman Emperor Phocas accepted the Pope's superiority over all bishops. It was at this point that the Pope began referring to himself actually as the universal bishop. It was also at this time that the Assumption of Mary was fully accepted as doctrine by the Pope. Now we get to the Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602 to 628, and hopefully you should be able to tell from the name when the war started and ended. So, it broke out between the Eastern Roman Empire and Iran, And the last war between 572 and 591 had ended with the Eastern Roman Emperor Maurice helping Iranian King Khosrow II regain his throne. However, when Maurice was murdered by his rival Phocas, Khosrow declared war on the Eastern Romans to avenge him. Khosrow quickly advanced, capturing Syria in 611 and even taking Palestine in 614, which was the first time that Jerusalem was in pagan hands for 3 centuries. In 620, Khosrow advanced even further, conquering Egypt as well. Now, there's this guy, Heraclius. 624, the Eastern Romans under the new Emperor Heraclius began advancing into Iranian territory, eventually resulting in their withdrawal from Eastern Roman territory in 626. Now, along with the Avars and Slavs, the Iranians tried to besiege Constantinople that year, but they were defeated, and at the Battle of Nineveh the following year, the Iranians were decisively defeated, ending the war. However, the war was super devastating and neither side won any land. Although Heraclius was able to bring back the true cross to Jerusalem in 629, his troubles were just about to begin. And here they are, retaking Jerusalem. And now we have Christianity in the Dark Ages. Alright, chat, how are we feeling? Oh, there's a lot of chat. Bro, who is this Pharaoh guy? Like, it's almost funny how bad his trolling is. I am knowledge and enlightenment. I have the answers. Okay, bro. This is Hapostor. Bro, what's this guy talking about? Anyways, do we want to continue the stream or not? It's up to you guys. Okay, one person said yes. It's getting kind of late. I'm feeling alright. Okay, that's very mixed. Yeah. Alright. Anyone else? Pharaoh, you have anything to tell us? It's getting late. It's 4:30 for me. Salon 27. Hey, same time. Same time, buddy. Alright, folks. I think I'm going to end the stream. I maybe could have gone longer, but the thing is, one, my throat hurts for talking for 2.5 hours. And also, I'm tired. And I feel like for the beginning of Islam, which is the next part, we should have full attention because that's a very important part. But you know, we made a very long way. We literally covered the first 6 centuries of Christian history, which I think is very impressive, not gonna lie. If I say so myself, I was not expecting at all to get anywhere near this far. I was thinking at most would end with the fall of the Roman Empire. We got very far. So yeah, first 600 years of Christianity, definitely not bad. It would be better if people weren't trolling and rage baiting. Okay, here's the thing. World Builder always rage baits, and it's not even very good. I'm sorry, bro, but your rage baiting sucks. Pharaoh, I genuinely don't know who this guy is, so I think he's actually trolling. Anyway, folks, let me see if let me turn on the video capture here. Bro, why am I upside down? Yo, anyone else see this? Oh. Can y'all see me here? Y'all see me here? Wow, we still have 7 viewers. That's crazy. I think this is like the best attended stream I've ever done. Am I half or full? I think I know what you're talking about. Guess if I'm half or full. Letter J wasn't even out when you shoot. Well, I mean, also the other thing is he wasn't using the Latin script, so it kind of doesn't matter. This seemed full. I actually made an entire video about my ethnicity. If you're interested, Ollie, would you like to see my video where I take my DNA test? I can send the link in the chat if you're interested. Your mom's from Congo, your dad's from West Area. Yeah. Alright, let's find this thing. Ba-da-ba-ba. I didn't even realize this was like a thing. That's cool. Anyways, Demographia. Subscribe to him. This is just me, really. There we go. Okay. Anyways, I didn't just turn on this thing for no random reason. Napoleon Bonaparte said, oh, that's hilarious. No, we're doing this because I want to show you guys someone special here. So, you see this buddy? You see this little guy over here? Hello there. Wanna say hi to the chat? Bro did not find my stream interesting. Like, he's been asleep for a while now. Hey there. I'm surprised he isn't like waking up or getting angry at me. Honestly, low-key, I kind of just want to sleep here now because he's here. So cute. Anyways, oh yeah, you were asking if I'm a Canadian. Hopefully this shirt answers it for you. There you go. I'm also just doxing myself at this point. I'm saying where I live. Whatever. Yeah, okay, how many generations I've been in Canada? Well, that's the thing. It depends which side of my family we're talking about here. Because on my mom's side, it's 1. But on my dad's side, it's like a couple hundred years. So, I don't know. I don't know the answer. All I know is I got the stash, bro. I definitely need to edit this out of like the official video when it comes out. Just crazy in North America, most people are there for generations. I think I got what you mean, as in you can count them. Obviously, like, you know, most of the world is like they can't even count that kind of thing. Oh, most people are. Oh, I see what you mean. Well, yeah, that's because Europe has not had much immigration over time. Yeah. Jesus means Hell Zeus. I assume he means Zeus. Like, bro, what's this guy even talking about? Like, genuinely. Anyways, I'm gonna end the stream now. It's 11:33. But honestly, yeah, this was way better than I expected. We had like 8 people in the chat at one point. You know, 4 people at least consistently. I really like this new guy. Wait, or is Ollie just? Are you? Wait, bro. Are you like? Wait a second. Are you like the guy who was my buddy back in like 2019 on Discord? Because if you are, then I do remember you. Bro, that'd be crazy. Oh no! What? Okay, yeah, I know who you are, bro. That's funny. That's actually hilarious. Yeah. Wait, didn't you like design my frickin' what is it? Like logo? That was you, right? Yeah, guys, this is the guy who designed my logo. That's cool. Obviously, thank you, World Builders, because you've always been a Giga Chad, my biggest supporter. Thank you, Sir Welch. Appreciate you being here. Even this Pharaoh guy, even though he's just here to troll, I appreciate you here as well. Uncle Sam, if you're still here, you know, I salute you. Um, I mean, obviously, other people came and went, but, you know. My videos of us. Mike History Ireland. Okay, I'll look this up. History Ireland. Um, like, is this what I'm looking for? Okay, on YouTube. Oh, this you mean? Like my video that I made 5 years ago? Or is this also 5 years ago? Yo, we need like, can someone make a remake of this? Cause we need this. Bro, what's this? Anyways. Yeah, we need to remake this. Alright, guys. Peace out. Thanks so much for showing up to a 2.5 hour stream. Thank you, Uncle Sam. Appreciate you, brother. Why do you stop uploading, by the way? I won't end the stream till I find out why he stopped uploading. Yeah, okay. Ah, you became the typical mapper. You stopped making maps. Alright. By the way, can you DM me on Discord? Because I've not talked to you in ages, so please do that. Alright, see ya, guys.